Hey everyone, welcome to the That's Allowed podcast. This is your hostess, Audrienne McKeon. And today I'm here with Richard Haiduck. Please introduce yourself, Richard.
Well, thank you, Adrian. Thanks for having me on the show. Um, I have been in the life sciences business most of my working career, and I started a gradual retirement about 5 years ago. I've had a very active retirement, but most recently I took on this project to write a book, which is something I had never done before, and it's turned out to be quite an adventure.
Yeah, writing a book is definitely an adventure. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the book, about the project.
So this is a story that I haven't really told to people very much, but I'm just starting to tell it. When I was 7 years old, I wanted to be an author. And I really felt strongly about it. I thought, oh, that's the coolest thing. And I started writing, and every day I'd write a story, and it was never longer than a page. And it was always some sci-fi or fantasy or something that I kind of out in left field. And then after about a year of that, I kind of had this thing that happens to 7-year-olds where I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go out and play basketball, or I want to go play with my friends or something like that. So it stopped, and it went on hold for 65 years. So I was talking with my wife last night about this, and I said, did I ever tell you I wanted to be an author when I was 7? And she said, no, that's a story you've never told anybody. And I said, well, I've got a chance tomorrow because I'm on That's Allowed. And that's where they want to hear stories that haven't been told. So
Perfect.
Anyway.
I'm so glad you shared that story. That's wonderful. I hear that so often that people, are getting back in touch with the things that they haven't, didn't remember that they enjoyed
Right.
from childhood. Especially now during COVID, when it's kind of things have been interrupted, routines have been interrupted, and people have the kind of time and space to explore these different things.
Right.
So it's really wonderful that so many people are getting back in touch with the creative projects that they enjoyed as kids. So
Yeah,
that's really wonderful.
So this is not writing in the sense that I was doing it like when I was 7.
Mhm.
It's not creative writing. It's interviewing people, and the book is all in their words. It's their stories about what they've done to reinvent themselves in their retirement, what has been important to them, what has been their passion in their retirement. And every interview started with, how would you describe this stage of your life?
Hmm.
And then I shut up, I turned on the tape recorder, and I started asking really deep questions like, oh, really? Tell me more about that. Why was that important to you? So open questions that they then could open up and tell me what they were doing and what it meant to them, and how it became important to them, and how it transformed this stage of their life. So it was great fun.
So what we would call oral histories in academia.
Yes, oral
Yes.
history is the perfect word for it.
So what did you learn from that experience, from talking to all of these people?
At first, I learned, well, first of all, I learned a little bit about interviewing. It was a little rockier at the start. I developed some patterns. One of the real turning points for me, I was driving to one of the interviews, and I was listening to Terry Gross, the iconic NPR
Absolutely.
interviewer. And while I was driving, I thought, you know what, if I could do 1/10 of what she's doing in terms of getting people to open up. And she taught me to say, oh, really? And there was a new interviewing skill. And once I recognized that I wasn't leading the witness, once I recognized that I wanted them to just download to me, and I just asked clarifying questions, that was a really revelation to me.
Yeah.
I think the other kind of set of learnings were, these people taught me about their retirement, and it influenced the way I think about my retirement. And how do you set goals? What do you feel is important to you? What are the things that you never imagined doing that became parts of their lives? One lady that I interviewed fairly early in this, she'd had 2 knee replacements. She had 2 hip replacements. She was on a cane for 3 years.
Mm.
And then she got all better. And she said, it's never going to be any better than this. I got 4 new sets of parts. Something else might break down. I want to do something really tough. And I said, well, what was that? She says, I want to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro,
Oh,
um,
wow.
the tallest mountain in Africa, a 6-day climb. And all of her girlfriends said, you're crazy. You can't do that. You couldn't have done that before you had all those surgeries. You're in your 70s. Why are you doing this? She says, because I want to do this. It's important to me and I'm going to do it. And I thought, this lady just taught me something about being gritty, being persistent, and not settling for the fact that she had some difficulties medically, but she was going to overcome them with her grit and her determination.
Absolutely.
I'm
So,
supposed to say, oh, really?
yeah. Oh, really? It's so funny because I was thinking that I was like, I could say, oh, really here. But that would be a little too on the nose. So, what the next question that I'd like to ask, so you were suggesting that you could perhaps share some of these stories of these retirees that, are not being told, don't have a common platform. So, are there stories that you'd like to share of theirs? I know you have permission to share some of these stories
Yes,
with the
yes.
audience.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. I think each of these people that talked to me were sharing something that they'd maybe shared with some people, but they said, oh, it'd be really neat for other people to hear my story. So the book is really built around sharing what they wanted to say. Um, one fella in particular, one fellow in particular had a really difficult medical time. He'd had a liver and kidney problems. He'd had an aortic valve replacement. He was in and out of a coma for 6 months. And, they thought he was going to die. They thought this guy is just really has a rough time of it. He came out of that, as you might expect, as a different person. He came out of that with a whole new lease on life. He says, I got a second chance. I get to do this over again. I get to do other things. And as you might expect, when you get a second chance like that, you give back, you volunteer, you help others. He became very active in his community. There was a house for kids that was being built, kind of a playhouse for disadvantaged kids. And he led the community effort to fundraise, get that built. And about a year later, they said he was the Millbrae Man of the Year for his service to the community. And this guy's story, there are people that he had worked with that knew that story, but not a lot of other people did. He's kind of a local celebrity, but he deserves to have his name up in lights for having transformed himself and gone to this level of commitment to the community. So he's someone I really admire and someone who did something very, very special. I have another story of, again, someone who went through a very difficult patch. In his case, some of it was health, but some of it was more about relationships. And I think what I'd like to do is actually read his exact words, because his words are more eloquent than I could ever be.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, yes, by a mile.
All right.
Because I grew up in the 50s, there were not a lot of people who even called themselves gay. People were just undercover, and it was very negative. There was an appeal to being gay, and I was drawn to it, but it terrified me. I didn't want to be a faggot. I didn't want to be a queer. That's the kind of pejorative language that I learned, and that I think anyone growing up at that time learned.
Yeah.
I look at who I was when I was in my late 40s. This was after he had come out. I met the man who became my husband. We lived together for 18 years. I think that relationship had a lot of good things about it, but it was also a reflection of my own limitations. I don't know if I was asking for enough for myself, and maybe I was settling. My breakup with my partner was something that was unexpected. I was not unhappy in the relationship. There were a lot of things about it that I liked. He was someone that I really cared about. It was in many ways a happy life. Ultimately, what triggered our breakup was that he was not willing to put me first, and that's what I needed. It was pretty stunning to me because it was so out of left field. It was hurtful, and I was angry too, as you might imagine. When I look at it now, I'm glad to not be with him anymore. It exploded a great deal of how I held my life. So now he's broken up with his partner of 18 years. He's in a very low spot in his life.
Yeah.
He's really struggling with it. And his family history was one of having macular degeneration in the family. So in his 60s, he starts losing his eyesight after having lost his partner. It's hard to imagine anything tougher than that combination of those two things.
Yeah.
So let me go back to reading his words again about how he dealt with it.
Yeah.
Dealing with all of that, I needed to deal with just reordering and recreating my life. I discovered this group called Trillium. What Trillium means is that we are both limited human beings as well as unlimited divine spiritual beings. We have feet in both places. It opened me up to fully understand spirituality, of how I think we all got here and what we're here for. Trillium also talks about awakening to a recognition that we're both these things, both human and divine. Trillium has been a useful path. The trajectory of my life has really changed. I see myself in a very different place. And I just, I can't do justice to the conversation. He was just so transformed by it. And his close friends knew the story, but he had never really disclosed the story. And I was just stunned by it. I just was so overwhelmed by what he'd been through and how he dealt with it. I'd never heard of Trillium. I don't know if you've heard of Trillium. I
have
didn't
not.
know what that was. I'm not an advocate or an opponent to it, but for him, it changed his life. And he went on to form some new relationships. He said, I've never felt better about myself in my whole life. So it was really quite a remarkable transformation for him. Any questions about either of those first two stories?
Yeah. So my question, it brings up a lot of things for me. I'm always it's like you said, it affects you so much to see someone else go through a transformation like that and to share that with you. Just to get vulnerable enough to be able to share that kind of painful place that he had gotten to, and then to share almost even more vulnerably, I would say, this thing that had really made him happy, because sometimes sharing our joy is actually the scariest thing because people might judge it or they might, laugh at it or whatever it is.
Right.
So to open up to you like that is really remarkable, I would say.
And this was a complete stranger. I'd never met this guy. One of the other people I interviewed referred me to him. And she had said, he's been through a bit of a rough patch because he's recently become blind. And so we had the interview and I said, just tell me what's going on in your life. And we went through all this stuff. And then the interview was just about done. And he said, oh, I forgot to tell you, I'm going blind too. And I said, what do you mean? You forgot to tell me? I said, doesn't that dominate? He says, I've got so many things going on in my life. He says, that was just one more. And then we talked about, what it was like to go blind and some travel experiences that he had and some things along those lines. But it was an astonishing interview. And we actually ended up having a couple of different interviews just to completely refine, the story.
Yeah,
But
and what a neat lesson too, that going blind was not the forefront of his mind. That might
yes,
be from the outside the most, pressing thing that we would see. But for him, it was just one thing among many going on in his life.
right. And the other thing he said, which I thought was remarkable, he said, the blindness taught me one thing. And I thought, oh, yeah, I wonder what that is. He says, to appreciate the disabilities of others.
Wow.
And I said, what an unselfish way to look at it. Most people would say, oh, I'm really pissed off. I can't see, or I got to get a ride to go there, here and there. It was none of that. It was, I can appreciate others who have disabilities. I have a whole new empathy for them.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing guy.
How do you think that affected your empathy?
I just, several of the interviews, I just said that person has gone to a place that is beyond what I've ever been. I hope I can move over, kind of 10% towards that.
Yeah.
Um, and this other story I wanted to share with you as
Mhm.
well was real eye opening to me, and still has a lasting effect. This is a group of girlfriends. There's 5 of them that are lifelong friends, and they got together and they formed what they called owls. So old, wise, learning, still. And it's five ladies in their 70s, and they see themselves, they know that they're old, they think that they're wise, but they sure are learning still. And what they learned about was how to deal with end of life. So once a month, each one of them takes turns to kind of pick the topic, and it's something to do with end of life. And these lifelong friends get together and they come to terms with all of the things that they're going through. And some of that is death related, but some of that is, just getting old and hobbling around a little bit. Some of it's spouses who are starting to deteriorate. Some of it's, different stages of their lives, of their kids and that sort of thing. They come from different backgrounds. One of them has done a lot of kind of mindfulness and Buddhist meditation kinds of things. Others are more traditional religions. But the thing that they've done is dealt with something that the rest of us avoid, and that is thinking about stuff that is inevitable. It's
Yeah.
going to happen. And these 5 ladies have um, separately dealt with the issue, but more importantly, collectively dealt with the issues and talked it out. And they said, each time they get together, it's a different emotion on the table. Sometimes they're crying together, sometimes they're laughing together, sometimes it's a bit of both. Sometimes it's a topic that, bounces around a bit. They read certain books in preparation for their meeting every month. They sometimes have a movie that they watch together. But they've learned to interact with each other in a way that they walk away feeling better about the end of life issues that they're talking about.
Yeah.
Uh,
What
that
was,
that one changed me. I just, because I don't think about that stuff.
yeah.
I don't know about you, but don't you feel kind of invincible? That's going to happen to somebody else.
I
And
think a
these
lot of
ladies
us
say,
feel that way.
yeah, and you even at my age of 73, I still don't think about that very much. I keep thinking I'm going to keep going and going and going.
Hmm.
And these ladies have said, no, I'm not going to keep going and going and going. There is an end to this, and I ought to think about it and talk about it and deal with it.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so, I don't know, just so enlightened might be the word. Um, they say that the collective discussion is not characterized as religious or spiritual or anything like that, but it's 5 friends being friends.
Yeah.
Um, some religion comes into that, and spirituality comes into that, and the Buddhist thing comes into that, and all that. But those are the asides. The real essence of their group is five friends being friends. I just found that was magic. I just was so impressed with that.
Yeah. So how did it change you?
That I've come to think more realistically about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think in some ways it may have speeded me up a little bit.
Mm.
That clock is ticking, um, and there's a bunch of stuff I want to do. So I'm going to go write a book, or
Yeah.
I'm going to go do a long bike ride, or I'm going to go do something because my clock is ticking. Um, One of the things I've written about in my blogs is COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and I talked about reopening retirement, and you got to have a plan of how are you going to come back, and how are you going to get yourself back on track. Um, and there was a lot of interest in that subject, so then I wrote a second one, and I talked about the risk to retirees, and so everybody said, well, that's obvious. And I said, yeah, the first part is really obvious. The first part is, yes, we're old. Yes, we have other diseases. Yes, we're medically at risk. All that stuff that we read about every day. Okay, but risk number two and vulnerability number two, our clock is ticking. And we can't sit and wait for COVID to go away to start getting back to the stuff that we want to do. And so that's been, so I think to answer your question, I think the acceleration of my activity may be part of it. And then kind
Yeah.
of more of a sense of the inevitability of this, that death is going to happen.
Excuse me.
So one of the guys that I interviewed had a very ambitious plan for doing a lot of traveling.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to him in kind of a follow-up discussion not too long ago. And he said, and I said, well, what are you doing now? And he says, well, I'm not doing traveling.
Yeah.
He said, but I had to do something else. I couldn't just sit here. And he says, my clock is ticking, just like your clock is ticking. And I said, well, what are you doing? He said, I've taken on a project, a genealogy project. And he said, I'm finding out about my family and my background and all the relationships and all that kind of stuff. And he said, I'm having a ball doing it. He said, it's like, I never would have done this if I would have gone off and done my original plan, but I did a reset, and the reset is really cool, and I'm having a ball with it. And I thought, wow, that's the way it's supposed to work. So,
And how has that affected you?
well, in some ways I had it easy because I had started on this book project before
Mm-hmm.
there was a COVID.
Yeah.
And then COVID came along, and I'd get locked in the house and couldn't go out or do some other stuff. So the book is just way ahead of schedule.
Yeah. I guess I got to write a book, right?
Yeah, and it made it a little more uh, a little less of an intrusion on my other activities, because the other activities were kind of disappearing.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we would have liked to have been doing by now
Yeah.
disappeared. But it's been fun doing the book. It's been great doing the interviews, and now that the book is done, it's great kind of telling people about the book, because people say, oh, let me tell you. And so now I'm almost got my sequel in mind, because everybody I tell the stories to, they say, oh, I've got another one you ought to think about. So
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah. You're a quick study.
Well, as a writer and as a podcaster, I must say this has been a really wonderful thing in a lot of ways. I have a lot of people who are now have time to talk to me, who
Yes.
normally I would never get to interview. And as a book midwife, a lot of people are now writing that book that they have always told themselves they were going to write someday. Well, guess what? Someday's here. So business has been booming for me, which is great. But I know that it has interrupted a lot of people's plans in terms of travel and things like that. So it's really encouraging to hear that those people have been able to translate that into something creative and meaningful to them.
One of the things that I need to be realistic about too is that the book has a bias to optimism. Um, it, if I called up somebody and I say, I want to talk to you about your retirement, they say, I'm having a miserable retirement. And they say, oh, do you want to talk about that? No, I don't want
No.
to talk about that. and in some ways, it's probably okay because it might not have been that great to have that in the book. But this bias towards optimism causes this to not be cross-sectional. It's not statistically valid. It's not representative of all people in retirement, but it is representative of people who have reimagined things.
Mm.
One of the ladies had a delightful choice of things to do. She said she and this is a different group of girlfriends decided they wanted to learn to play the ukulele together.
Oh, that's so fun.
And they're having a ball. And one of them may have known a little bit about it, but the rest of them were kind of all learning together. And so they get together on a regular basis. They play ukulele. They do sing-alongs. They've got certain songs they've specialized in now, and they've actually started going out to schools and playing in front of kids groups or kids classes. So despite their kind of still being in the steep part of learning curve, they're out there, kind of on stage doing their thing, and having just the greatest time with it. It's really been an important part of their socialization and their learning a new skill and all of that. So uh, it's not climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, but it's doing something that's as important to her as Kilimanjaro was to that other lady.
Yeah.
And that's what's been fun to see.
I think you really hit the nail on the head with the learning still, you know?
Yes,
As long as you're still learning and still trying new things,
yes. Yeah, and we've just scratched the surface here. The book is 50 stories, and we've touched on maybe less than a half dozen of them.
Yeah.
They're all over the map. One of the reviewers said, "You've gone from the exotic to the mundane and everything in between." And that's what I was hoping for. I didn't want all, kind of wild things that nobody could do. I wanted things that people could look at that and say, "Oh, that's pretty interesting. That it either is relevant to me or is not." Um, and I think I'm hoping that the stories that are not relevant to someone will still be interesting and enlightening.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll see. And people don't have to like every one of the stories. That's okay if they don't. There's so much all over the map that I would think that there will be some stories that people will say, well, that's okay. I'll read through it, but it isn't really relating to me the way some of the others did.
Yeah. Who do you think needs to hear this message or read this book?
I think, well, retirees or people who are getting ready to retire is kind of the obvious first choice. Um, some of the people I interviewed have been retired for a while, and they said it's time for a reset. I need to kind of reconsider what I'm doing now and do something different because I've kind of burned out of whatever it was I was doing. One guy who's been retired for about 10 years said, there's a part of work that I miss. I think I'm going to go back to work for a while, but it's going to be on my terms and it's going to be a different kind of thing. So I think people who are being reflective and thinking about their own retirement path, I think are the ones who will benefit from it, or maybe just be entertained by it. And that's okay too. I think if you read a story and say, "Oh, that's kind of cool," that is something I would not have thought of.
What do you think is the main message or takeaway? What do you want people to walk away from the book with?
that all things are possible,
Mm.
that you can make this stage of your life into what many of the people in the book said, this is the happiest time of my life. And a couple of them said, and I was dreading it.
Mm.
I loved my job. I was reluctant to leave it. Um, and I just wasn't sure what I was going to do all day. And now I've found X or Y or Z. And the, um, the passion that people have found through doing something completely different than what they had been doing during their working career. Um,
Yeah.
it's been great to see. It's been fun to watch.
Well, that is a perfect segue into the next thing that I like to do, which is a little exercise.
Okay.
As you said, you're not done. There's still more to come here. And so I'd love to do this with you, especially so that the retirees who are listening to this or people who are about to retire know that they still have something ideal to look forward to. So I want you to close your eyes for a moment.
Okay.
Trust me here. All right. I have a magic wand and I have just waved it. And now all your dreams have come true. So everything that you still desire, it has just come to pass. And I want you to look around your life and just describe to me what it's like now that it's perfect.
Can I open my eyes now?
Sure thing. Some people like to close their eyes so they can sort of visualize it while they're speaking. Other people prefer to open. Totally up to
Okay.
you.
Okay. So I think this sounds funny, but where I'm at is awfully darn good where it is now.
Beautiful.
I would say that perfect is just a continued set of family and friend relationships that are vibrant and with neat things going on with them. I think there's another component of this. I spent a fair amount of time volunteering, helping social enterprises, kind of mentoring the CEOs of those organizations. And that brings a tremendous amount of pleasure to my life. And I'm just enjoying that and want to see that continue as well. So what am I wishing for? What am I dreaming for? Keep going the way it's going.
Beautiful.
It's not, there's not kind of a missing piece right now.
So I want you to go a little bit deeper into that. So you were talking about helping people, right? So I want you to see yourself helping someone and really see on that person's face how much of an impact you've just made on them. And just take a moment to feel what that feels like. And
Okay.
can you describe that feeling to me?
So this morning, I was mentoring two social entrepreneurs one of whom was kind of solving a housing for disadvantaged people in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And his eyes lit up as we had this discussion. He got some new ways of looking at what he was trying to do. And I could feel it in his heart and in mine that we had changed something for the better. And it's a big part of my life is to work with people, and they're all kind of half my age and twice my energy and 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 probably twice as smart as I am. But they're also there looking for some wisdom from some people that have some gray hair and who have been through some of this stuff before. So that's incredibly gratifying to me, and it's a big part of of what I'm doing in this stage of my life.
I love that. One of my mentors once said to me, always strive to be the dumbest person in the room. And what that means is just surround yourself by people who are super smart so that you can constantly be
Right.
learning and getting better.
Yeah. So one of the
Yeah.
guys that I do this with, we were working together as panelists for some of these social entrepreneurs, and he's kind of the class clown too. And he kind of turned to the group, and I'll exaggerate this a little bit, but he said, seems like Richard doesn't know that much. He's always asking these questions. Doesn't he have something where he can just say what he thinks should be? And then people kind of chuckled because they thought he was joking. And he says, I'm just kidding. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to ask questions and get people to figure this out for themselves. That's what mentoring is. Mentoring isn't giving them the answer. So I took that as a compliment. I'm not sure if it was or not, but I took it as one.
Absolutely. So mentoring seems to be a really important piece of your life.
Yes, yes. And several of the people I've interviewed for the book are actually mentoring in different circumstances.
Mhm.
Some in one is taking kind of a high school kid and getting him into college and helping him through a path to being an architect. And so
Wow.
it's a very one-on-one kind of mentoring of a young person. Some of the other people are mentoring different organizations. One guy's working in a school for autistic kids, and he's um, helping that organization to succeed.
Beautiful. You also talked about family
Yes.
and that your family is very important to you and that, continuing to have positive interactions with your family is very important to you. So I want you to just take a moment and see your family around you and you're laughing, you're talking, you're having a wonderful time. And what feelings does that bring up for you?
Um, it's a different kind of joy. We have my daughter's family up in the Seattle area,
Mhm.
and we've been not getting together because of COVID,
Yeah.
and it's making me crazy. And we've tried doing it on Zoom, and we actually we have Zoom parties and that kind of stuff. But I think there's a missing piece right now, and we have my other daughter's family is here in the Bay Area, but even with them, we don't get together nearly as frequently as we used to, and it's leaving like a big hole because you can't do it on the phone, you can't do it on Zoom. And when we do get together with the ones who are local here, there's some, you can't give them a hug, and you can't express yourself in the same way. And the grandkids in particular are saying, I don't want to infect you.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the one that we trace it back to if you get this disease. I couldn't take that.
Yeah.
And so it's really I don't know, it's not where I'd like it to be right now. I've got a wonderful wife who's been married for 52 years, and she is just terrific. But this is taking a toll on her too. Um, she just wants to be with our kids and with the grandkids. And the grandkids, of course, are at an age where they're changing and they're maturing, and they're real people now, and missing that is just really been tough.
Yeah. So that's really hitting me hard for a couple of reasons. The first being because my my daughter, when COVID first started, she was at her dad's house, and when the kind of lockdown hit, because I'm in Seattle and we got a full lockdown very quickly because we were sort of ground zero in the United States, and so I didn't see my daughter for a month in person, a month, and for a mom that's really hard.
Yes, yeah,
A
yeah,
lot can happen in a month, your kids are changing so fast. She's
yes,
8, she was 8 at the time, so it's just like, oh, so hard. And then
yeah,
the other thing is my father, who is in his 80s, he's not doing so good lately. And my sister keeps telling me, he's he's got some issues and he doesn't remember things as well. And, this is really hard. And I was supposed to go out there in March. I had a plane ticket and I
right,
didn't get to use that plane ticket and I still haven't gotten to get out there. And so it's one of these things where, we Zoom regularly, but
yeah,
again, it's really hard. He gets distracted easily and he doesn't really know what's going on all the time. And so it's really hard not to be there to just hold his hand and take him for a walk and, look him in the eye and do all those things that, where you can feel someone's heart connection, even if you can't communicate.
Right, right.
So that's been really tough.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's more difficult with your own child. With us, it's our kids are grown and they're off on their way and that sort of thing. But the grandkids are at the formative stage,
Yeah.
but they're kind of one step removed. We want to be part of that, but it's not the same as being a parent where your connection isn't as great.
Yeah. But I must say this technology has been really remarkable in helping everyone get through this.
Yes, amazing stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this. Is there anything else you'd like the audience to know?
No, this has been fun. I've enjoyed it. Your questions have been ones that caused me to think deeply about some of these subjects, and that's been useful. That's always a good thing, I think. So,
Good. So, where can people find you and where can they find your book?
okay, so the book um, is on pre-order at Amazon right now. It'll be published on November 17th, but people are pre-ordering it now. The hardcover is not available for pre-order for another couple of days, but will be shortly. Um, to kind of keep up with what I've been doing, more information on the book and so forth, my website is probably the best single place to go, and that's www.richardhaiduck.com. And that's got the reviews from the early reviewers. It's got various blogs that have been written over the last several months about the whole subject of retirement. It's got a link to an interview that CNBC did with me, and that was kind of fun. And so that's kind of the central point for shifting gears and for its author.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you. This was fun. I enjoyed it.
Good. Good. All right. Take care.
Okay, thank you.